The meaning of a word depends on the context in which it's used and the emotion with which it's used. And he said that the same word will not have the same meaning in a different time in your life. So for example, if you take love, love to me when I was a teenager with my hormones raging was different than what it is now, you know. Motherly love is different. Fatherly love is different. Brotherly love is different. Erotic love is different. Why? Because the words are trying to express some other things that are happening in our brains. And what we experience at one time may not be the same the next day or the next year. So the meaning we have for the same word may be different. So he said, if you're going to have a discussion or you're going to use some words, the first thing you have to do is to make some rules about what you mean by the word that you're using, called rules of language. You got to understand first what you mean by. So if I say the word God, I can guarantee you Muslim is thinking Allah, Christian is thinking Father, and Hindu is thinking Brahma or Vishnu, and Buddhists are thinking Buddha. But I didn't say any of those words. I just said the word God. That's it. Why? Because what they have as a definition is different in each one's mind. So he said, language creates a picture of the real world, and that most philosophical problems are merely the result of philosophers' misuse of language. Experience only seems complicated because of our confused description of it. We are expressing our experiences with words, and we have confused description of it because of the words we use, which represent knots in our understanding, and untangle the knots, and philosophical questions will simply dissolve. I love this. And this is one of the reasons why we have so much differences of opinion or difficulty to make the other person see what we're trying to say. And the problems of conflict and disagreement come from. So language, limitation of language works in all these major aspects of life: God, soul, spirituality, religiosity, because there are no concrete definitions for any of this. And supernatural terminology for natural neurophenomena is used. Perfectly natural explanation is there, and they use the word like God, divinity, soul, and spirit when they did not have, but they did it at a time when they did not have enough knowledge. But I don't think we should have any excuse for that anymore. But the knowledge is not out there enough yet. So give you an example, God, right? This is all picked up from dictionary. The one supreme being, one of several deities, the supreme being considered with reference to the sum of attributes, image of deity, and any deified person or object, which is like Jesus Christ in my view, and Buddha. And goddess is the same. But by the way, I've never seen any one of those gods. And female god or deity, I've never seen one. But a woman of extraordinary beauty and charm and greatly admired adored women, I've seen lots of them, especially in Brazil, you know. I have no comment on this. This is for the women. I'm just an equal opportunity entertainer, you know. No comment on that one. By the way, it's a fantastic... What? I'm good, but not that good. Unbelievably fantastic statue in Uffizi in Florence, Italy. Unbelievable. So we have to be aware of the spiritual scientists and the terminology they use, which I call as a pseudoscientist. Give you an example, spirit molecule. So in Amazon, they have this tea. When you drink, you have these experiences, and they call it spirit molecule. And God, the helmet, you might have heard, Persinger from Canada did that. He put a helmet and sent electromagnetic waves, and people said, well, we feel like somebody is watching us. Of course, they are being watched in the other room. But in any way, they felt like they had something different, you know. And this man got gene. I'm like, what the heck is a God gene, you know? And what about G-spot? Not the one you guys are thinking about. It's the God spot. There's actually an expression called God spot. And also God module by a guy by the name of Neurosurgeon, who is a very good neurologist, but used these words, located in the temporal tip of the temporal lobe. So what's the problem with this? When you use the word spirit molecule for whatever the active principle that makes you experience this so-called mystical experiences, what it is the dimethyltryptamine. Totally different connotation when you use that expression versus a God or spirit molecule. So everything, God gene is nothing but a gene that increases the vesicular monoamino transporters. So you have this ability to have the so-called zoning, so-called transcendence. But it is nothing but people who have this transmitter in a higher concentration and experience that. That's all it is. God helmet, nothing but electromagnetic waves going through your helmet. And God module, so-called, when you have seizures, some people have this experience of being with the God or memories of gods. That's nothing but part of the brain that's close to our memory called hippocampus that obviously is going to make us have some memories that may be related to the religion we are raised in. And that's why I said that when people have seizures, if a man who was never exposed to Jesus Christ had a concept of Jesus Christ when he had seizures, that'll be interesting to me. But it doesn't. They only experience the gods that they have been raised with during their childhood. Human brain, it's an awesome thing. And I've seen it a lot of times. Because they have the most complex brain on the face of the earth. And this is what makes us perceive everything we see, interpret everything we see, imagine everything we have done, and create everything we have done. And Protagoras figured that out. But he, I was a male chauvinistic society at that time, so they used the word man for everything instead of a person or a human or a woman. Man was the measure of all things, is what he said. But I think that may have to be changed to brain is the measure of all things. And I don't know if I should take credit, but that's what I want to say. Because this is what makes us experience and interpret and imagine everything we do in our lives. So, whether it's God, near-death experience, soul, out-of-body experience, or a sensation of spirit, it's because of our brains. So as knowledge evolves, so will the idea of God, right? So will evolution of soul and afterlife. Because, I love this slide. This is the iceberg of knowledge. The God, soul, afterlife, and religion doctrination, if your knowledge is just like only the tip, not deep enough, that's where you will be. But as you inquire and amass knowledge and go to the depths of the knowledge, the iceberg of knowledge, I think you'll become an atheist and humanist. So it's good to say that neurobiology finally is shining light on the mystery of God, transcendence, soul, and spirit. And when I made the movie 2 years ago, I knew that there will be more and more discussion of this in American society. In April of, I think, this year, I picked up this magazine, a Discover special edition about the brain. And what interests me the most is this one. Is God only in your head? And the answer is yes. And it is coming. It's coming more and more. But this is the thing. There's no human experience of any description that can simply be reduced to a biological process. But that in no way offsets the meaning those experiences have for us, whether it's falling in love or grieving or having a baby or coming close to death and having a transcendental experience. Now, this is Nancy Evans, who is the International Association for Near-Death Studies, which brings me to the third problem that we have for why the world is the way it is, which is the problem of human condition. There's no other animal on the face of the earth that is exquisitely aware of its own finality and mortality. chimpanzees, 99% almost identical with our own DNA, not similar, identical with our own DNA, apparently have only 7 days of projection into future. I don't know how they got that information, but that's information I got. But we are the only animal, I like to call myself an animal, by the way. Some people call it humans, but we are the only animal that is capable of looking billions of years into future and billions of years into the past. And it's good and it's frustrating. It's good because it allows us to plan. It allows us to imagine and come up with solutions. But it also gives us unbelievable restlessness because we know we're going to die. That's the human condition. So this belief in God, soul, and afterlife and heaven is based, I think, on the balance between intellectual inquiry to just know the truth and belief in soul and afterlife due to fear of death and consequently an emotional need for hope and solace in one's life. So when I talk about the idea of God, I think to me there are two important questions. Does God really exist, which can be purely academic and intellectual curiosity and search, without having an emotional bias about for some kind of answer? It's an yes, no, unlikely, mostly unlikely or more probable. But the second question to me that's very important is, but why do we need God? That to me, I think that to me is the reason why many people believe in God, because it's believed on an emotional need based on three things: fear, comfort, and hope. So when we have a discussion whether God exists or not, and somebody is having an emotional need to believe in God, we're coming from different stages when we have a discussion. And there will not be a consensus because we're talking different things, and different needs. And in fact, this was interesting. As Blaine Pascal said, heart has reasons that reasons cannot understand. And that's kind of why believers have an emotional need, and they believe in faith, and they don't need scientific explanation for their belief. Now, in fact, this is interesting because this said that this part of the brain called orbitofrontal cortex deals with reward, pleasure, and apparently believers have more activity there, whereas non-believers have more activity here that deals with disgust. Well, you may have an excuse why you're disgusted with the believers, but I don't think we want to express it, But we need to get more information. But this was one thing that I thought was interesting. But hard task ahead, but no reason to despair because the numbers are on our side. As knowledge improves and becomes commonplace, the tables will be turned and the scales will be tipped. And it's already happening in the United States of America. As you know, if you take all the different religious denominations or demographics in this country, compared to that, the demographic in this society that's increasing numbers while all the other ones are going down is the demographic of non-believers. And thank goodness for internet. Well, you got to be careful. It'll be easier to get information, but also easier to get misinformation. But I'm hoping that this knowledge will be commonplace. That brings me to the final aspect of the so-called universal brotherhood. Well, why is that the experience is mostly similar among different people from different cultures and religions? That's because we came from a single source in Africa. Every human that's walking on the face of the earth today came from a single source in Africa. In fact, I read an article recently, 160, 180,000 years ago, humans were this close to become extinct, except for a group that they believe survived at the southern tip of Africa because of the conditions that allowed them to survive. And then from there, they spread to the rest of the earth, onto the rest of the earth. And because we came from a single source, the mitochondrial DNA of every human came from a single female. Every human. Well,